All right, today we're diving into something that touches so many lives, but man, can it be confusing. We're talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And you know what? We're going to cut right through all that noise. The goal here is to give you a really clear, practical guide on the best treatments out there right now. So let's jump in.
So you've been through something traumatic, or maybe it's someone you care about, and now you're trying to find help. But where do you even start? It can feel, well, completely overwhelming, right? You feel lost, you're not sure who to listen to, because there's just so much conflicting information everywhere.
But here's the thing, and I really want this to sink in. There is a clear path to getting better, a path that's actually backed by solid science. These treatments, they really work for most people. Think of this explainer as your map. We're going to walk that path together. Okay, first up, the gold standard therapies. So what do the world's top clinical guidelines actually recommend right out of the gate? So the number one recommendation, the thing that experts at places like the VA and NICE point to first, is something called trauma-focused psychotherapy. Now, this isn't just, general talk therapy. It's way more structured. These are highly effective therapies that get right to the heart of the matter, helping you directly process the memories and thoughts tied to the trauma. We're going to talk about the big three here: prolonged exposure, or PE, cognitive processing therapy, CPT, and EMDR.
All right, let's take a quick look at how these actually work. First up is PE, prolonged exposure. The whole idea here is to help you gradually and, most importantly, safely face the memories and situations you've been avoiding. It's all about breaking that cycle of fear. Then you've got CPT, cognitive processing therapy. This one's a little different. It zeroes in on your thoughts, those really tough, unhelpful beliefs that trauma can leave behind. Things like guilt or shame or self-blame. And finally, there's EMDR. This one uses something called bilateral stimulation, like following a light with your eyes, to help your brain reprocess traumatic memories so they don't feel so raw.
And do they work? Oh yeah, this is exactly why they're called the gold standard. We're talking about 60 to 80% of people getting a huge reduction in their symptoms. Just let that sink in for a second. And get this isn't some endless years-long thing. We're often seeing this kind of major improvement in just 8 to 15 sessions. So with these therapies, getting better isn't just a possibility, it's the most likely outcome. Now look, I've got to be real with you, this kind of therapy, it's not always easy. It can be really tough work, especially at the beginning. But the experts, like the folks at the VA's National Center for PTSD, all say the same thing. Persistence is everything. Sticking with it absolutely pays off. That hard part at the start, that's actually part of the process that gets you to real, lasting change. Okay, moving on to medication and other tools. Besides therapy, the big question that always comes up is, what about medication? And it's a great question. Medication can definitely be a helpful piece of the puzzle, but it's super important to understand exactly what its role is. So when you look at the clinical guidelines, they are crystal clear on this. There are three main medications that are recommended for PTSD. That's sertraline, paroxetine, and venlafaxine. But, and this is maybe even more important, let's talk about what's not recommended. Benzodiazepines, you might know them as Xanax or Klonopin, are a big no, and here's why. They just don't work on the core symptoms of PTSD. In fact, they can get in the way of your therapy, and they carry a really high risk of dependence. So it's a hard pass on those for PTSD. And the cool thing is, we can get even more specific. So, for example, if nightmares are a really big part of the picture for you, there's a highly effective non-medication approach called imagery rehearsal therapy, or IRT. If we're talking about kids and teens, the go-to treatment is a special version called trauma-focused CBT. And hey, what if you're stuck on a waiting list for therapy? There's a great evidence-based app from the VA called PTSD Coach. It's not a replacement for a therapist, for sure, but it's an awesome tool to help you manage symptoms in the meantime. All right, next section, treating combat-related PTSD. Now, for veterans and service members, it's really important to know that the core treatments we just talked about, PE, CPT, and EMDR, are absolutely still the top recommendations. But combat trauma often comes with its own unique set of challenges that need to be addressed. One of those huge factors is something called moral injury. This is that deep, gut-wrenching feeling of guilt or shame about things you did or maybe things you saw. And that's often a really critical piece to work on, especially within CPT. Another thing is mild traumatic brain injury. There's a lot of overlap there, but the guidance is really clear.
Therapy should absolutely still go forward, maybe just with a few tweaks to the pace. And here's an interesting little detail. While the US VA and DoD are big proponents of EMDR for combat vets, the guidelines in the UK are a bit more cautious, and they tend to lean more towards PE or CPT for that group. Okay, let's talk about all the new and experimental treatments you might be hearing about in the news. You know, the stuff that gets a lot of buzz. It's super important to be really, really clear here. These are still under investigation. They are not the standard of care right now.
Let's take MDMA-assisted therapy as the big example. The early trials, they looked really promising. But then, in June of 2024, an FDA advisory panel actually voted against recommending it for approval. They had some real concerns about the data and safety. And a couple of months later, in August 2024, the FDA made it official and rejected the application, telling them to go back and do more research. So what's the bottom line for you today? It's simple. MDMA is not an approved treatment. The path forward is still those proven gold standard therapies we've been talking about. And what about some of the others? You might hear about ketamine. It can give people really rapid relief, which is great, but that relief is often very short term. And for that reason, the official VA and DoD guidelines actually recommend against using it for PTSD. Then there's hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or HBOT. You know, some studies look interesting, but there just isn't enough strong evidence yet to make it a recommended treatment. The message from every major expert group is pretty much the same. Stick with what we know works.
Whew. Okay, that was a lot of information, I know. So let's make this really practical. Let's take everything we've just covered and boil it down into a simple 4-step action plan you can use to get the right help starting today.
All right, here it is, your path forward. Step 1, get a proper diagnosis. Talk to your family doctor, a local clinic, whatever it takes to get that official assessment and referral. Step 2, and this one is so important, find the right therapist. When you call people, ask this exact question. Are you trained in PE, CPT, or EMDR? Seriously, that is the most important question you can ask. Step 3, if you think medication could help, talk to a psychiatrist specifically about those recommended options, sertraline, paroxetine, or venlafaxine. And finally, step 4, use your resources. If you have to wait for therapy, don't just sit there. Use a tool like the PTSD Coach app. Know your local hotlines. You now have the knowledge you need to be your own best advocate.
So, we've gone through a ton of stuff, but I want to leave you with this one core idea. Getting better from PTSD isn't some big mystery, it's not a shot in the dark. There is a clear, proven path forward. Real, effective help is not some far-off dream, it is right there, within your reach. So the only question now is, what's your first step going to be?